The letter trembled in my hands, its wax seal broken, the words blurring through tears I refused to let fall. I, Elias Navarro, scribe to the governor of Massachusetts, had just penned the decree that would bind the one I loved to another. And tomorrow, I'd hand it to them myself. In the quiet of my Boston office, the quill still wet with ink, I stared at the document. It was 2025, and though the world had changed, love still carried the weight of sacrifice. My role as a scribe was ceremonial, a nod to tradition in a state that prided itself on history. But this decree wasn't just words on parchment. It was my heart, torn and bleeding, sealed with the governor's crest. I'd written it with precision, every flourish perfect, granting permission for Avery Quinn to marry Julian Harper. Avery, the non-binary soul who'd stolen my breath 3 years ago under a canopy of stars, was slipping away, and I was the one tying the knot. I met Avery in a Cambridge bookstore, their laughter cutting through the hum of a rainy afternoon. They were 22 then, with dark curls that framed their face like a Renaissance painting and green eyes that seemed to hold entire worlds. I was 23, a quiet writer with dreams too big for my small apartment. We bonded over dog-eared poetry books, our hands brushing as we reached for the same volume of Whitman. That night, we talked until the shop closed, spilling secrets under the glow of string lights. Avery's voice, warm and unguarded, felt like home. They were non-binary, unapologetically themselves, and I fell hard, faster than I'd ever thought possible. But love, I learned, doesn't conquer all. Not when family expectations, societal pressures, and personal fears weave a cage tighter than any law. Avery's family, old money Bostonians, wanted stability for them, a partner who fit their vision of legacy. Julianne, a 27-year-old lawyer with a sharp smile and sharper ambition, was that vision. She was kind, brilliant, and everything I wasn't, polished, connected, and approved. When Avery told me they were engaged, their voice cracked with guilt. "Elias, it's not about love," they'd said, eyes pleading. "It's about duty." Duty. The word haunted me as I walked home through Beacon Hill's cobblestone streets, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot. My apartment, a cramped studio overlooking the Charles River, was no refuge tonight. I poured a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light as I replayed every moment with Avery. The late-night drives along the coast, their hand in mine as we sang off-key to old rock songs. The way they'd trace constellations on my skin, whispering stories of the stars. We'd built a world together, fragile but real, and now it was crumbling. The decree wasn't just a formality. In Massachusetts, certain high-profile marriages, those tied to influential families like the Quinns, required a symbolic imperial decree, a tradition rooted in colonial history. As the governor's scribe, I was tasked with crafting it. When the request landed on my desk, I'd nearly laughed at the cruelty of it. Me, of all people, writing the words that would make Avery someone else's forever. I could have refused, passed it to another scribe, but something in me, pride, masochism, or love, wouldn't let go. I wanted to face the pain, to feel every cut of it. The next morning, I stood outside the governor's mansion, the decree tucked into a leather folder. The air was crisp, October's chill biting through my coat. Avery was inside, preparing for the engagement gala, a lavish affair for Boston's elite. I'd been invited, not as a guest, but as the scribe delivering the decree. My role was to present it to the couple, to read it aloud before the governor and the families, sealing their union in the eyes of tradition. My stomach churned at the thought. The mansion's ballroom was a sea of crystal and gold, chandeliers casting light over silk gowns and tailored suits. I spotted Avery immediately. They wore a tailored emerald suit that matched their eyes, their curls swept back, a nervous smile playing on their lips. Julianne stood beside them, radiant in ivory, her hand resting possessively on Avery's arm. The sight was a knife to my chest, but I forced myself forward, clutching the folder like a lifeline. "Elias," Avery said, their voice soft as I approached. Their eyes held mine, a storm of unspoken words swirling within. For a moment, the room faded, and it was just us, two souls caught in a world that wouldn't let us be. "Quinn," I replied, my voice steady despite the ache. "I have the decree." Julian smiled, oblivious to the undercurrent. "You're the scribe, right? Avery mentioned you. This is such a sweet tradition." I nodded, unable to speak. Avery's gaze didn't waver, and I wondered if they could see the cracks in my composure. I opened the folder, my hands shaking slightly, and began to read. "By the authority of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I hereby decree the union of Avery Quinn and Julian Harper to be bound in marriage, blessed by tradition and law." The words tasted like ash, each one carving deeper into my heart. As I finished, the room erupted in applause, but Avery's eyes never left mine. There was something there, regret, maybe, or a flicker of the love we'd buried. I handed the decree to Julianne, my fingers brushing hers, and stepped back, my duty done. But as I turned to leave, Avery's hand caught mine, brief and desperate, a touch that said what words couldn't. I didn't stay for the champagne toasts or the speeches. Outside, the night air hit me like a wave, and I leaned against a lamppost, gasping. The decree was signed, the marriage approved, but my heart was still writing its own story, one where Avery and I weren't just a footnote. The weeks that followed were a blur of routine and pain. I threw myself into work, drafting letters and decrees, anything to keep my mind off Avery. But their face haunted me, their voice echoing in every quiet moment. Boston, once a city of warmth and possibility, felt like a maze of memories I couldn't escape. I'd see them in the curve of a street lamp, the glow of a coffee shop window, the rustle of leaves in the common. One evening, as I sat at my desk, a knock startled me. I opened the door to find Avery, their coat dusted with snow, their expression raw. "I couldn't stay away," they said, voice trembling. "I tried, Elias. I tried to be what they want, but it's killing me." I pulled them inside, my heart racing. They looked exhausted, their eyes red-rimmed, their hands shaking as they clutched a scarf. "What are you doing here?" I asked, though I already knew. The weight of their choice, the marriage, the expectations, it was too much. "I love her," Avery said, their voice breaking. "Julianne's good, Elias. She's kind, and she deserves better than a lie. But you—" They stepped closer, their breath warm against my cheek. "You're the one I can't let go." We stood there, inches apart, the space between us electric with everything we'd never said. I wanted to pull them close, to erase the decree and the world that kept us apart. But love, I'd learned, was as much about letting go as holding on. "Avery," I whispered, "what are we doing?" They didn't answer. Instead, they kissed me, soft and desperate, a kiss that tasted of salt and promises. For a moment, we were us again, two kids in a bookstore, dreaming of a world where love was enough. But the moment passed, and reality crashed in. "We can't," I said, pulling back, my voice thick. "You're getting married." "Not yet," they said, their eyes fierce. "And not like this." That night, we talked until dawn, unraveling the mess of our hearts. Avery told me about the pressure from their family, the fear of disappointing them, the guilt of loving me when they were promised to someone else. I told them about the decree, how writing it felt like signing my own sentence. We laughed, we cried, and we held each other, knowing it might be the last time. By morning, Avery made a choice. They wouldn't run from their family, but they wouldn't marry Julian either. They'd face the fallout, whatever it cost. "I want to be honest," they said, their hand in mine. "With her, with them, with myself, and with you. I didn't know what the future held, whether we'd find a way back to each other or drift apart in the chaos. But as I watched them leave, their silhouette fading into the snowy dawn, I felt a spark of hope. Love didn't conquer all, but it could fight. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days after Avery's visit were a storm of uncertainty. I went through the motions: work, coffee, sleep, but my mind was a battlefield, torn between hope and dread. Avery's words echoed in my skull. Not yet. And not like this. They'd promised to confront their truth, but what did that mean for us? For Julianne? For the decree I'd written, now a symbol of a future neither of us wanted? Boston's winter tightened its grip, snow blanketing the city in silence. I avoided the places we used to haunt: Harvard Square, the bookstore, the pier where we'd watch the sunrise. But avoidance couldn't erase the ache. Every night, I checked my phone, hoping for a message from Avery, dreading the news that they'd changed their mind. The silence was deafening. A week later, I got a call from the governor's office. "Elias, we need you at the Quinn estate," my supervisor said, her tone clipped. "There's been a complication with the decree." My heart sank. Complications meant questions, and questions meant exposure. Had Avery told their family about us? About their doubts? I grabbed my coat and headed out, the folder with the original decree burning a hole in my bag. The Quinn estate, a sprawling mansion in Brookline, was a fortress of old wealth. Ivy-covered walls, marble floors, and portraits of stern ancestors glaring from every corner. I was ushered into a study where Avery's mother, Beatrice Quinn, sat behind a mahogany desk. She was in her late 50s, her silver hair pulled back, her eyes sharp as cut glass. Avery stood by the window, their back to me, their posture rigid. "Mr. Navarro," Beatrice began, her voice cool. "It seems my child has concerns about the marriage. They claim the decree was rushed. I'd like your perspective as its author." I glanced at Avery, but they didn't turn. My throat tightened. "The decree was drafted according to protocol," I said, choosing my words carefully. "If there are concerns, I need to know the specifics." Beatrice's lips thinned. "Avery believes the marriage is a mistake. They've been emotional. I trust you, as a neutral party, to clarify whether this decree holds legal weight." Neutral. The word stung. I was anything but neutral when it came to Avery. I wanted to scream that I loved them, that I'd written the decree with a breaking heart, but I couldn't. Not here, not now. "The decree is ceremonial," I said, my voice steady. "It's a tradition, not a contract. The marriage's validity depends on the legal documents, not my words." Beatrice nodded, but her eyes never left mine, as if she could see the truth I was hiding. "Thank you, Elias. You may go." Avery finally turned, their eyes meeting mine for a fleeting second. There was pain there, but also determination. I wanted to stay, to demand answers, but I was dismissed. As I left the estate, the snow crunched under my boots, each step heavier than the last. That night, Avery texted me, "Meet me at the pier." Midnight. I didn't hesitate. When I arrived, the Charles River glittered under the moonlight, and Avery was there, bundled in a scarf, their breath visible in the cold. I told them. They said without preamble, "I told Julie and I can't marry her." My heart stopped. What did she say? She was hurt, Avery admitted, their voice raw. But she understood. She said she suspected I wasn't fully in it. She deserves someone who loves her completely, Elias. Not someone torn in two. I stepped closer, the wind biting my face. "And your family?" "They're furious," Avery said, a bitter laugh escaping them. "Mom thinks I'm throwing away our legacy. Dad hasn't spoken to me since yesterday, but I'm done living for them." I reached for their hand, and they let me take it, their fingers cold but steady. "What now?" I asked, afraid of the answer. "I don't know," they said, their eyes searching mine. But I know I want you in my life. Not as a secret, not as a regret. I want us to figure this out, together. We stood there, the river reflecting the stars, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. But the moment was fragile, a spark in a storm. Avery's family wouldn't let go easily, and the decree, ceremonial or not, was a reminder of the world we were up against. The next day, I was called back to the governor's office. This time, it was the governor himself, a grizzled man in his 60s with a reputation for fairness. "Elias," he said, leaning back in his chair, "there's talk of replacing the decree. The Quinns are reconsidering the marriage entirely. I need you to draft a revocation." A revocation. The word hit me like a wave. It meant Avery was serious. They were walking away from the marriage, from their family's expectations. But it also meant more work for me, more exposure to the pain of this unraveling. "I'll do it," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. As I worked on the revocation, my mind raced. What would happen to Avery if they defied their family? Would they be cut off, ostracized? And what about us? Could we build something real in the shadow of all this? The questions gnawed at me, but I pushed them aside, focusing on the words. This time, the quill felt lighter, the ink less like blood. When I finished, I delivered the revocation to the Quinn estate myself. Avery was there, waiting in the garden, their face pale but resolute. "You did it," they said, taking the document from me. "You're undoing what you wrote." "It's just paper," I said, but we both knew it was more. It was a symbol of their freedom, of the fight they were choosing. They hugged me, their arms tight around me, and for a moment, the world felt right. But the storm wasn't over. Beatrice Quinn appeared at the garden's edge, her expression unreadable. "Avery," she said, her voice low, "we need to talk. Now." Avery squeezed my hand before letting go. "Stay," they whispered. "Please." I nodded, my heart pounding, as they followed their mother inside. I waited in the garden, the winter air sharp against my skin, wondering if this was the beginning of something new, or the end of everything we dared to hope for. The garden was silent, save for the crunch of snow under my pacing feet. I waited, my breath fogging in the frigid air, as Avery disappeared into the mansion with Beatrice. The revocation decree sat heavy in my bag, a fragile hope that could either free us or ignite a fire we couldn't control. I leaned against a bare oak tree, its branches clawing at the gray sky, and tried to steady my racing heart. What was happening inside? Would Beatrice convince Avery to change their mind, to return to Julianne, to the life they'd been groomed for? Minutes stretched into an eternity. I thought of the first time Avery and I had kissed, in a hidden corner of the Boston Public Library, surrounded by the scent of old books and the thrill of secrecy. It was reckless, exhilarating, and utterly ours. Now, that memory felt like a lifeline, something to hold on to as the world tilted beneath us. The door finally opened, and Avery emerged, their face unreadable. They walked toward me, their steps deliberate, their eyes fixed on mine. "She's letting me go," they said, their voice barely above a whisper. "But it's not over." "What does that mean?" I asked, stepping closer, my hands itching to touch them, to ground us both. "They're giving me an ultimatum," Avery said, their breath catching. "If I walk away from the marriage, I'm out of the family. No inheritance, no connections, nothing. They think I'll cave." My stomach twisted. The Quinns weren't just wealthy. They were power, influence, a name that opened doors across New England. For Avery to lose that, it was a sacrifice I couldn't fathom. "And you?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "What do you want?" They looked at me, their green eyes fierce with something I hadn't seen before, certainty. "I want to be free," they said. "I want to be me, not their puppet. And I want you, Elias. If you'll still have me." The words hit me like a tidal wave, washing away the fear, the doubt. I pulled them into my arms, the cold forgotten, the world narrowing to the warmth of their body against mine. Always, I whispered, my lips brushing their temple. Always. But freedom came at a cost. Over the next few days, Avery faced the fallout. Their family cut them off, as promised. No calls, no emails, just a cold letter from their lawyer outlining the terms of their disinheritance. Julianne, to her credit, handled the broken engagement with grace, issuing a public statement about mutual respect and parting ways. Boston's elite whispered, their gossip a low hum in the city's social circles, but Avery held their head high. They moved out of the Quinn estate, crashing in a friend's apartment in Somerville, their life packed into 2 suitcases. I helped them settle in, carrying boxes up creaky stairs, trying to ignore the weight of their loss. "You don't have to do this," I said one night, as we sat on a second-hand couch, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. "You could go back, explain." "No." Avery cut me off, their voice firm. "I'm done explaining myself. This is my life, Elias. I choose it." Their strength humbled me. I'd spent so long hiding my own heart, afraid of what loving them might cost me. But Avery was fearless, or at least they pretended to be, and it made me want to be braver, too. We started rebuilding, piece by piece. We spent evenings walking through the common, our hands intertwined, no longer hiding. We cooked cheap meals in their tiny kitchen, laughing over burnt pasta and too salty soup. For the first time, we were open, 2 people in love, not a secret tucked away in the margins. But the world wasn't done testing us. One afternoon, as I left the governor's office, I found Beatrice Quinn waiting outside. Her presence was a shock, her tailored coat and steely gaze out of place on the bustling street. "Elias," she said, her tone clipped but not unkind. "Walk with me." I followed, wary, as we crossed into the public garden. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fading flowers. "I know about you and Avery," she said finally, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "I know you're part of why they walked away." My heart pounded, but I didn't deny it. "I love them," I said simply. "And they love me." She stopped, turning to face me. "Love is a luxury, Mr. Navarro. Avery's choice has consequences, not just for them, but for our family's legacy. I'm asking you to let them go. Let them come back to us." Her words were a punch, precise and calculated. I thought of Avery's laugh, their stubborn hope, the way they'd chosen me despite everything. "That's not my decision," I said, my voice steady. "It's Avery's, and they've made it." Beatrice's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Respect, maybe, or resignation. "You're braver than I thought," she said. "But bravery doesn't pay bills or mend broken families." She left me there, her words lingering like a bruise. That night, I told Avery everything. They listened, their face pale, but they didn't waver. "She's wrong," they said, their hand finding mine. "Love isn't a luxury. It's the only thing worth fighting for." We kissed under the dim glow of a street lamp, the world quiet around us. But the fight wasn't over. The Quinns had influence, and they weren't above using it. Rumors started swirling about Avery's instability, about my interference in their family. My supervisor at the governor's office began watching me closely, hinting that my job might not be secure if I stayed tied to the scandal. Avery, too, felt the pressure. Their job at a local nonprofit, already precarious, was threatened when donors with ties to the Quinns pulled funding. We were being squeezed, our love a target in a war we hadn't started. But we didn't break. We leaned on each other, finding strength in stolen moments. A coffee shared in a crowded cafe, a dance in their cramped living room, a promise whispered in the dark. One night, as snow fell outside, Avery turned to me, their eyes bright with an idea. "Let's leave," they said. "Not forever, but for a while. Somewhere new, somewhere we can just be us." The thought was terrifying. Leaving Boston, my job, the only home I'd known. But it was also exhilarating. Where? I asked, my heart racing. Anywhere, they said, grinning. As long as it's with you. We started planning, dreaming of a fresh start. Maybe Portland, with its quirky charm, or a small town in Vermont where no one knew the Quinn name. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like ours. The idea of leaving Boston lit a fire in us. Avery and I spent nights hunched over a laptop, researching towns, jobs, and cheap apartments. We dreamed of a life unburdened by the Quinn's shadow, where we could love openly, fiercely, without fear. But dreams, I learned, are fragile things, easily shattered by the weight of reality. A week later, I was called into the governor's office. My supervisor, her face grim, slid a letter across the desk. The Quinns have filed a formal complaint, she said. They claim you used your position to influence Avery's decision against the marriage. They're demanding your resignation. The room spun. I'd expected pushback, but this was a calculated strike. The Quinns couldn't control Avery, so they were coming for me. It's not true, I said, my voice shaking. I wrote the decree as ordered. The revocation was their choice. I believe you, she said, but her tone was heavy. But the governor can't ignore this. You're suspended, Elias, pending an investigation. Suspended. The word echoed as I left the office, my future unraveling. Without my job, I had no savings, no safety net. I thought of Avery, their own struggles mounting, and wondered if love was enough to carry us through this. I found them at the pier, our old meeting spot, their silhouettes stark against the icy river. They got to you, they said when I told them, their voice thick with guilt. This is my fault. No, I said, grabbing their shoulders. This is us, choosing each other. They can take my job, but they can't take that. Avery's eyes searched mine, and for a moment, I thought they'd pull away, overwhelmed by the cost of our love. But they didn't. They kissed me, fierce and unyielding, their hands cupping my face. We're leaving, they said. Now. We didn't wait for permission or closure. We packed what we could, clothes, books, a few mementos, and bought 2 bus tickets to Burlington, Vermont. The city was small, progressive, a place where we could blend in, start over. As the bus rolled through the snowy New England hills, Avery's head on my shoulder, I felt a strange peace. We were running, yes, but not from fear, from a life that didn't fit us. Burlington welcomed us with open arms. We found a tiny apartment above a bookstore, the kind of place we dreamed of in our Cambridge days. I got a job at a local paper, writing human interest stories, while Avery worked at a community center, teaching art to kids. The pay was modest, the winters brutal, but we were free. We built a life, messy, imperfect, ours. One evening, as we walked along Lake Champlain, the sunset painting the water in hues of pink and gold, Avery stopped. They pulled a small box from their pocket, their hands trembling. I don't have much, they said, opening it to reveal a simple silver ring. But I have you. Marry me, Elias. My breath caught. Marriage had been a wound, a symbol of loss. But here, with Avery, it was something new. Yes, I said, my voice breaking. 1,000 times yes. We didn't need a decree, a governor, or a family's approval. We planned a small ceremony by the lake, with a few new friends as witnesses. The day was cold, the sky clear, and as we exchanged vows, I thought of the decree I'd written, the one that had nearly broken us. I'd undone it, not with ink, but with love, with choice, with the courage to rewrite our story. Years later, I'd look back on that Boston winter and see it for what it was, a crucible. The Quinns never reached out, their silence a final cut, but Avery and I built something stronger than their legacy. We faced whispers, doubts, and doors slammed shut, but we also found joy, mornings tangled in sheets, nights laughing over bad wine. moments where love was enough. The decree I'd written was a relic, a piece of paper lost to time. But the life we made, the love we fought for, that was our true vow, written not in ink, but in every step we took together.